This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's community access radio station Plains FM 96.9 and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
So Circular.
Welcome to So Circular, a sustainability radio show and podcast discussing waste reduction and circular economy. I'm Anthea Medill of Remix Plastic, and this program is brought to you by The Rubbish Whisperer. Kia ora koutou katoa, and welcome to episode 8 of So Circular. This episode we will be discussing what to keep from Covid-19 and how some of the recent changes could stay for the good of people and the planet. But before we start, some good news. The government recently announced that almost $1.1 billion from the budget will be put towards restoring the environment, and the government expects that investment to create around 11,000 jobs. And plastic-free shopping is back with bulk food stores open again. And to help support small waste-free food businesses is Sustain Aotearoa, a recently launched incorporated society of independent zero-waste grocers, and I'll pop a link for those guys on our website. So today we are happy to have Helen Townsend from The Rubbish Whisperer back with us. Morena, Helen.
Kia ora, Anthea. It's nice to be back in the studio again. In the good news, you forgot to mention Remix Plastic's Hui Feather earrings.
Oh, yeah. It's quite good news.
It is good news. Tell us more about those.
Yeah, it's been a pretty hectic week since Jacinda wore a pair of our Remix Plastic Hui Feather earrings. And it's actually nice to have a bit of a break and be back here with you doing this, something semi-normal.
Yeah. I like that we just call her Jacinda now. Not
first
New
name.
Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern.
No, we're on first name now. Yeah.
Should we crack on so we can get back to doing earrings then?
Yeah.
Well, it's not just good news for Remix Plastic, because it's been a really effective tool to tell a story of the unintended consequences that can happen when sustainability isn't integrated into fashion. And it shows how we can support New Zealand businesses.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see something that's made from recycled plastic be quite mainstream. And it's been awesome for sustainability conversations. So as we've stated in previous episodes, a circular economy aims to design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and regenerate natural systems. And since we've come out of our level 4 lockdown, there's been lots of conversations about the good and bad experiences that people may have had along the way. But there's also been discussions about how this has impacted the environment. And so in this episode, we are keen to discuss some of the things that have arisen during our response to COVID-19 and discuss a few of the things that we think should continue into the future.
Yes, and when we talk about things to keep from COVID-19, we're not diminishing the suffering of people and the direct and unintended negative consequences of the disease or the lockdown. But we want to look at how we can use what we've learned to make the world better for nature and for people.
So there was a lot in the news about reduced air pollution, and I know that even I noticed here in Christchurch that the views over the city were much clearer. And interestingly, global carbon dioxide emissions decreased by 17% compared to the previous year, which is the largest drop since World War II.
So the question is, if we were all in lockdown across the whole globe for such a long time and emissions only dropped 17%, where are the other emissions coming from?
It's pretty full on to think, hey, that only 17 dropped. So transport makes up 20% of emissions. So even if all transport is carbon-free, we've still got 80% of carbon emissions. Electricity generation, which makes up 40% of global emissions, is still being generated to power and heat our homes. And globally, most electricity is still generated from fossil fuels.
Yeah, so I suppose, we didn't all just go and live in a tent without
Any
power on
Yeah.
for 8 weeks. And when we work from home, more electricity is needed. Instead of heating offices and schools, we're heating thousands of individual houses. And there's research out of the UK that shows that we only save electricity when we work from home if we only heat the room that we're working in. But of course, in New Zealand, many of us are living in cold, damp houses anyway, so we don't want to be encouraging everybody to have cold houses.
Yeah, it's awesome that the lockdown didn't happen through winter. Otherwise, everybody would have been cranking their power to heat their entire houses.
Yeah, I think from an emissions point of view, we were lucky in that respect.
Yeah.
And because, man, if we'd been shut in our houses in the rain.
With our children for 4 weeks.
With our lovely families for such an amount of quality time.
You can have too much of a good thing, eh? So manufacturing and construction accounts for 20% of emissions, and this work largely carried on and only stopped for a short period. And these statistics show that we need a systemic change to reduce greenhouse gas emissions because just changing our habits isn't quite enough. The whole system needs a little bit of an overhaul.
That's true. And, of course, farm animals are still farting and burping all the way through lockdown. So producing lots of emissions there.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing that can be a contentious conversation to have, that people can reduce their meat and dairy intake to reduce their carbon emissions. But that's one of those things that you don't have to just completely cut it out. If everybody did a little bit, then it would have a big impact.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much focus on individuals' impact on the environment, but without switching fully away from fossil fuels, then we won't be able to reduce CO2 emissions more than maybe 17%. But we can get rid of the driving emissions. There is an interesting thing about the reduction in emissions, though. So the clearer skies means that there's a whole new generation that realises that the level of pollution that we're used to doesn't have to be the norm. So in India, the Himalayas are now visible from 160 kilometres away for the first time in 30 years.
It's amazing, hey?
Yeah.
And in New Zealand, air pollution decreased by up to 75%, and generally that was due to the reduction in car traffic.
So there's this thing, this is a little bit unrelated. There's not really a link here. Sorry.
It is.
Okay. There's this thing that for every generation, there's a downward creep of environmental norms. So, for example, if you're used to there being 100 birds in a flock, that's your norm. But then if half the birds die, the next generation thinks that 50 birds is normal. So if the number drops again, then the level that they plan to restore it to is 50 birds, not 100 birds.
Oh, that's really interesting, eh? It's like the lockdown has given everybody an insight into what it could be.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think of when you say that is that fishing thing where, like, my granddad used to catch massive blue cod and now there's only tiny ones. And it's like, yeah, because now this is our new normal.
Yeah, but you have to experience it to know. I mean, when people tell you stories, they say, I could see the Himalayas 100 years ago, but you need to see it to really have that sink in that this is not necessarily how it has to be.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So we've had the realisation that we like it less polluted. So how are we going to keep air pollution down when we get back to the new normal?
So some of the cool things that happened during lockdown were things like people taking up cycling as their form of exercise. And with carless streets, it's the perfect time for fresh cyclists to regain their confidence because there's no cars around.
Yeah, so Bike Auckland says that 60% of the traffic during lockdown was bikes and foot, which shows that lockdown has shown that we're not in love with our cars. We just don't want to bike if we don't feel safe.
Yeah, and a really simple thing to carry on would be for us all to continue those habits and start cycling to work or kind of trying to push those into our normal routine now, even though it's winter and cold.
Yeah, because the more bikes are on the road, then the safer it is for cyclists.
Because there's fewer cars as well.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
It is a win-win.
Except that it's real cold now. So
that's true, but Christchurch is flat, so
that's perfect
not
for
really
it. Yeah,
excuses.
there's hardly any ice anywhere. Yeah. In France, apparently, there was a 53% rise in cycling post-lockdown.
Yeah, and a global surge in pop-up bike lanes as well. So bike lanes have appeared in Auckland. I think they put in 17 kilometres of them. And other places around the world, New York, London, Paris, have all had more bike lanes, which is more efficient, better for your health. Did you know that biking to work cuts your risk of cancer by 40%?
I knew you were going to say that because that's one of your favourite statistics.
It's amazing.
It is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking to myself, I need to bike more. I work from home, so I need to do a little set commute where I go for a bike in the morning.
You need to commute back to your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another thing to reduce emissions is that lots of people found working from home worked well for them. So some people are going to continue that, which means there'll be fewer people commuting to the office in cars or bikes, and will reduce emissions from transport. But it'll reduce emissions, but only if they only heat the room that they're working in.
Yep. And we still need to remember that it's nice to see people in person.
Yeah, not everybody should work from home all the time.
No.
Yeah.
So the quieter cities have had benefits for wildlife as well.
Yeah, so during lockdown, there has been higher public awareness of native species in places that they are not usually found. So things like fantails in backyards and falcons in empty cities.
But how will we carry this on? Because, like we said, we don't want to stay home forever.
Yeah, so birds ventured into quieter cities and we can hear them singing more. So it's likely a combination of birds being more adventurous and the fact that we're noticing them because we've slowed down and gotten out of our cars. Yeah, so birds are enjoying the decrease in noise, light and air pollution, and along with messier public parks because maintenance has been stopped. So if we are all commuting by bike and implementing our lovely daily walks that we had during lockdown, then we'll notice them more as well and we'll reduce all of the pollution.
So I noticed a kiriru this morning on my way into town.
Awesome.
So I was driving to town, but a kiriru swooped right in front of the car and I had to brake for it.
Imagine if you
It was
killed.
amazing. It was, yes, I didn't. It got away.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm just imagining people biking with kiriru swooping by, dive bombing.
Oh, it's a beautiful vision for the world.
It is. There is one thing we don't want to keep, though, and that is the increase in rats that has happened during lockdown. Because pest control was deemed non-essential. And the other thing is that with the restaurants closed, rats came to people's houses instead. So people saw more rats. But it's a good reminder that pest control is essential for our native species. And to be honest, people seeing rats makes you realise that there are rats around and we need to do something about them.
Yeah.
And we won't achieve New Zealand's predator-free 2050 goal unless we sort out the rats in urban areas. But there was lots more backyard trapping because people who normally trap out in the wilds were trapping in their gardens.
Oh,
so, you know.
So the rats came to them.
Yeah, no.
Oh, nice.
Didn't even have to pack a lunch. They just come to you.
That's awesome. So another thing that we can do to have an impact on the environment is change our consumption. And obviously during lockdown, household consumption dropped as only essential things were available. And this meant that we couldn't buy things that we may still actually have needed but weren't essential. But it provided us an opportunity to assess what we buy and reflect on whether we need it and then adapt to other options if need be. And so everything that we buy has an associated carbon footprint, and that's the energy that goes into making it, to shipping it to us, and then where it goes and how it's disposed of after we're finished with it.
Yeah, and as we mentioned in the earlier episode on the hierarchy of needs, the richest 7% of the population, which is us and another 500 million people, are responsible for 50% of the world's carbon emissions, mainly through the stuff that we buy, through our consumption and our cars. So a really cool thing that happened during lockdown was more trees were given as virtual gifts.
So awesome.
So Trees That Count, which is an online tree marketplace where you can buy trees and you can gift them to people as well. They had a 175% increase in the number of people gifting native trees.
So awesome.
So amazing. And there's this really cool story. There's a Dunedin student who set up a gift registry for his 21st birthday because he couldn't have a party. And 180 trees were bought for him.
It's amazing.
Amazing,
So $10 a tree. That's such a good 21st present.
I know. It's a affordable 21st present that will last for hundreds of years.
Oh, so cool.
It's cool.
And following on from changes in consumer behaviour, it's awesome to see the acknowledgement of the importance of supporting local businesses that's been highlighted as a key strategy to boost our economy.
Yeah, so when you shop locally in New Zealand, there's so many cool benefits, including that tax stays in the country. So we don't think tax is a great benefit, but if you buy from New Zealand business who's employing New Zealanders, then income tax and company tax stays in New Zealand instead of being funneled overseas.
Yeah.
So we get schools and stuff.
Yeah, so it's awesome that something that is good for the environment has come out of this that's not being pushed as something that's good for the environment. It's just support your local businesses and it'll be good for all of us. and the environment.
Are we saying that things that are good for the environment can be good for the economy?
I know. Who would have thought?
Oh, amazing.
We've been harping on about this stuff for years.
Well, it took us a global pandemic for us to be relevant.
Jeez, that's depressing. Another interesting thing that kept popping up in the... Was it in the news? It's not in the
It
news.
was.
Yeah. Throughout the coronavirus response was that countries that have females in leadership roles responded differently than other countries. So, for example, New Zealand, Denmark, Taiwan, Germany.
I think it's safe to say that they responded better than, if not better than everybody, but definitely better than the
other
UK,
countries.
USA, Russia,
Yeah.
Brazil.
Yeah.
Obviously, there may be other factors at play there, but there are studies that show that the more women in Parliament, the better the health of the population.
It's amazing, eh? And that when more women are in Parliament, there's more spending on the environment.
Yeah, it's great. Interestingly, back to the businesses and the economy. So companies that have offered flexible working hours, up till now it's been predominantly women who have taken this offer up. And it's good that it's offered, but it has often been seen as part-time work by colleagues, even if they come in earlier so that they can leave for school pickup. And it's often the company that's getting the advantage, because it's also been shown that workers are just as productive in 30 hours as they are in 40. And
It's amazing to think that you get paid by the hour and you just do the same amount in 10 hours less.
yeah, because you get to 2 o'clock and you're tired, so you go and hang around making cups of tea.
Chit-chat.
If you've got a kid to pick up, then you're there, and then when you go, you go.
Yeah.
So you've got to be more efficient. And so flexible working's been around for a while, but people have been saying that flexible working or working from home won't be taken seriously until men do it too. So
And now everybody's doing it. Yeah, or was doing it for a while, including the kids as well. And it seems from people that I've spoken to that there were